is a fellow of the Institute. He's a very boisterous person, and he's highly mobile, moving from one sector of the industry to another. It covers oil and gas, telecommunication, banking and finance, and different sectors. So presently, he is the head of legal, LNIB Limited, and also a fellow of the Institute. And he will be speaking to us on entrenching an effective risk management and control system, the role of the Chartered Secretary and Administrator. Entrenching an effective risk management and control systems, the role of the Chartered Secretary and Administrator. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me as we welcome Mr. Omogbemi Adelagun, FCIS, to make his presentation to us virtually.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon.
Mr. Bobi, we can hear you. Please go on.
Can I share my screen now?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you. Is the screen visible to all? Hello?
Yes,
the screen is visible. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and of course, distinguished chartered secretaries and administrators. My name is Omogbemi Adelagun. As I've been rightly introduced, I'm a fellow of the Institute, also a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, UK, and fellow of the Institute of Corporate Administration. So I'll be taking you on this topic, very interesting, having listened to the last speaker on financial reporting. Entrenching an effective risk management and control system, the role of the Chartered Secretary. Our learning approach will be simple point demonstration. I'm very sure that most of you are already tired. We're in the afternoon, and of course, I don't want to bore you with cosmetics this time around. Simple point demonstration, and of course, interactive learning. Understanding of the key terms will be our main focus. What do you mean by risk? What do we mean by risk? It's very important to understand this concept, risk. Then when we understand risk, then we look at the corporate risk profile using the SWOT method of looking at what constitutes risk to a company. What are the risk areas in an organization? When we understand that, we now say, how do we manage this risk? And what is the effective way of managing risk as already agreed by experts? And why the Chartered Secretary? What is critical about the role of the Chartered Secretary to risk management? Then we now go to integrated risk management, which of course is the only effective way of managing risk. There is the traditional risk management, which we are going to see the difference between traditional risk management and effective risk management. When we're looking at this, we look at risk policy and strategy. risk prioritization and mitigation, and risk management tools. These are all you need as a chartered secretary, even whether you are a risk manager, whether you're a company secretary, whether you are a manager in the organization, everyone is responsible for managing risk. Everyone in the organization is a risk manager. Then we take our conclusion by looking at some of the takeaway stories and then the bigger picture of what we mean by risk management. And of course, I'll give you the useful resources and references, which you can always make reference to for future and detailed research. Excuse me, sorry.
Hello, maybe they're not hearing me. Hello? Hello?
Good afternoon. I just want to confirm if I'm here. So they are here. Someone. I mean, I've been here. Am I audible? Problem with this technology. Hello.
Yes, it's audible. It's audible. Please go ahead.
Okay. So let's go to the next slide. What is risk? What is risk? There is no need for us to bombard you with technical definition of risk. When somebody say risk is a consequence of probability that is about to, this is a long definition that is not necessary. Anything with a chance of bad consequence. If you look at the concise of Oxford Dictionary, anything with a chance of bad consequence, anything that is capable of producing a bad consequence is what is regarded as risk. And what is that? So when you look at this simple definition, it means everything is risk. Everything is risk. And risk is everywhere. And that its risk is a necessary continuum. It is not something that, oh, today okay, I've been able to manage this risk, and then you go to sleep. Risk is, everything is risk. Risk is everywhere, and risk is a necessary continuum. These are the findings and conclusions of Beta Scott Consulting, which is the leading risk management institution in the United States. So having understood what we mean by risk, that risk is just anything with a chance of bad consequence, and that risk is everywhere, and everything is risk, and it is a necessary continuum. There will never be any time where any organization will say, I am free from risk. There is not going to be any time where any organization will say, I am free from risk. So please let that be understood. And this concept of the definition of risk is what brought us to what we regard as integrated risk management. Once you properly understand and you can define risk properly, you will be able to properly manage risk. Now let's look at the traditional risk management and then integrated risk management. The traditional risk management says something about risk. Risk is a devil to avoid. That is the traditional risk management approach. Risk is a devil to avoid. But the integrated risk management approach, which is the modern day approach, says risk is a friend to manage. Organizations to stop seeing risk as something that is negative. It is not a devil to avoid. And that is the difference between when you take the Satan in the Bible and the Satan in the Holy Quran and the issue in Yoruba. In the Satan, in the Holy Quran, they will tell you, Satan, you must avoid Satan because Satan is an enemy. But in Yoruba man, we say Eshu is not Satan, it's different. Eshu is a friend. You must also befriend Eshu so that he will not tempt you to disaster. You must manage Eshu. And that is exactly the difference we are bringing in here between traditional risk management approach and integrated risk management. The risk is not a devil. So we need to drop off the cap of that definition of the whole theory, which says that risk is something you must avoid. You can never avoid risk. You can only manage it. Even when you solve one risk, there's another risk was waiting for you. Even the act of solving a particular risk will generate another risk. It's just like when you create in order to solve the risk of distance, we create aeroplane, and then we create ship that can move at faster rate because we want to solve the risk of distance. But in solving that, you create another problem. Another risk will come up because every device that is generated to solve a particular risk will themselves create a risk. And that's why we say risk is everywhere, risk is everything, everything is risk, everybody is risk, and that risk is a necessary continuum. So once we understand this definition, it is clear for you to understand this and take this away. And then you will be able to have a proper perception to the management of risk. And then you will be able to shed away the traditional risk management theory or risk management approach, which says that risk is a devil to avoid. Whereas integrated risk management says risk is a friend to manage. You must befriend risk. It can be a strength. When you use the concept of SWOT analysis, you will start seeing risk as something that is of both positive and negative polarities that must be effectively managed, not avoided. Individual focused, that is the traditional risk management approach. Risk management is individual focused because it is limited in focus. It's saying that there is a particular risk you need to manage, but in integrated risk management, it's enterprise focus. Everybody in the organization is regarded as a risk manager. Everybody, every organization, every department has to manage risk. But in the traditional risk management, they will tell us that risk management is only a function of a particular department. But in the integrated risk management, which is the modern day approach to risk management, is that everybody has a responsibility to manage risk because risk is everywhere. Risk ensues in everything. Everything that is in an organization constitutes risk. So there is nothing like a dedicated risk management department that only it is responsible for managing risk in the organization. Risk management is the responsibility of every manager, every individual in the organization. So that is the difference between traditional risk management and integrated risk management. And when you look at these two characters of these two approaches, you see that traditional risk management will have no any other consequence. It has to be pest-based and reactive. I believe that some of you understand the word pest. Pest is one of the tools of managing risk, but which is externally based. It's saying you have to look at risk from an external perspective. Whereas risk in the integrated risk management is SWOT-based. It's saying you must look at risk from both internal and external because risk is everywhere. But in the olden days, I mean, what the organization regards as risk is something that's going to come from outside and going to attack you. But now in the integrated risk management, risk is seen as both something that is internal and external. And that's why it is SWOT-based, because you have to use SWOT analysis. You have to use strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, which, of course, is an affirmation of the fact that both risk is both internal and external. So the integrated risk management approach should now be the approach everyone must embrace. And that is the only way we can effectively manage risk. And that is the conclusion of Emilia Facili, who is one of the very renowned risk manager in Harvard University, say that effective risk management is what is equal to integrated risk management. So when we have looked at the definition of risk and we have understood what effective risk management is, it means that when you look at an organization, where do we see risk? Where are the risks in the organization? If you look at the circle that is presented here, it's saying that everything in the organization, both within and without, don't forget we are using the SWOT base, which is peculiar to the integrated risk management approach, which is different from traditional risk management approach, which is pest-based. It's only looking at political, environment, social, and other external risks that affect the organization. Whereas the SWOT-based risk will look at both internal and external risk. The approach to risk is comprehensive. It is not limited in focus. It is enterprise focus. And that's why today you hear about enterprise risk management. Nobody is talking about risk management that is only circled within a segment of the organization. Enterprise risk management is saying, or what, in other words, integrated risk management is that risk is everywhere in the organization. Risk exists in all the departments in the organization and in every value chain or processes of the organization. And therefore, risk cannot be the responsibility of only one department in the organization. And that's why when you look at this, you see that every aspect of the organization, operations, facility, people, HR, customers, partners, consultants, product, assets, political, economic, everything constitutes risk. And the only thing that is standing in the middle that connects everyone is risk management, because everything, even the equipment, the capital, the IT, your intellectual, everything is risk in the organization, both internal and external. Regulatory, government, fiscal policies, which are external, are also risk. So the corporate risk profile that we are using is a SWOT-based risk profile. And that is what you should use when you want to try and get a perspective of all the risks that affect your organizations. So do not ever look at risk or perceive risk as a segmented or limited entity. It is a corporate risk profile that is SWOT-based, not best-based. Risk is both internal and external, and it is not the function of only one person in the organization. It is not a role and responsibility of only one department in the organization. Yes, you might still ask the question, and if risk management is the responsibility of everybody in the organization, then why do we still have risk management in banks? Why do we still have a risk management department in many organizations? The answer is that we still have them just to serve as the collator, the coordinator, the collaborator of risk management in the organization. It does not mean that the risk management department is the one that is responsible for managing risk. What they now do is that they collate all the risk and they have to monitor everybody and be asking you, look at your risk. What are the plans do you have? If you are in legal department, if you are in accounting, they will collate all your risk for you and ask you what are the devices that you are putting in place or the mitigants in which you are going to manage this risk. So it's not as if they are the only one that is there to manage your risk. The risk management department is just now a coordinator or a collaborator among all the various stakeholders in the organization. So the next question now is to ask why the chartered secretary then. We need first of all to understand what the chartered secretary is. The chartered secretary is not just a company secretary, because people always misunderstand some of these definitions that when you say a chartered secretary, we only mean a company secretary. Of course, if you're a chartered secretary, you are likely also to be a company secretary of the organization. But a chartered secretary goes beyond a company secretary. If you understand from the Chartered Governance Institute of UK, what the definition of a chartered secretary is that he is a multi-skilled professional in key areas of organizational management, which includes corporate governance and corporate administration. He is therefore an all-round risk manager. Chartered Governance Institute. That is the definition of a chartered secretary. And that is the definition you must go with, because people have limited the meaning of chartered secretary to mean someone who is going to end up as a company secretary. No, as a chartered secretary, you can play a lot of multifunctional roles in the organization. For example, I can mention myself, I have headed HR, I have headed procurement, I have headed administration, I have headed corporate services and logistics, even though I'm a lawyer. But because when you see an organization and because of your skills as chartered secretary, you will be able to operate in a multifunctional dimension in the organization. And also being a company secretary. The bank where I am, I'm a company secretary and legal advisor. But I have played the roles of a procurement manager, of an HR manager in various organizations where I have worked because I am a chartered secretary. So a chartered secretary does not define himself only in terms of being a company secretary. You are an administrator par excellence because you have been skilled and you have been trained in three areas: administration, management, and governance. Those are the three areas where you, as a chartered secretary, you've been trained. So when we talk about an administrator for a company, you don't have to be a company secretary. You don't have to be giggling for a company secretary because the company will only have one company secretary. And so as a charter secretary, you can play roles in management, areas of management in the organization: procurement management, HR management, corporate services, and also all other corporate services, corporate support role within the organization. Because you manage these three, you are a skilled professional in these three areas that we regard as administration, management, and governance. You are going to be dealing with three key things in the organization, which of course are the result of these administration, management, and governance: people, process, and product or profits. That's what organization is about. And when we talk about people, process, product, and profits, it's all about risk. People in the organization, whether customers, whether your employees, are all risk. Process in the organization, which are even being put in order to manage risk, to control risk, are also in themselves risk. It's just like when you take a flight because you want to get to London early, but that aeroplane itself can be something, can lead to something disastrous. In as much as it's trying to cover a risk of distance for you, can also generate tragedy. And we all see what has happened when we look at a lot of crashes that we have witnessed over the years. So everything, even the process that have been generated in the organization, that have been deployed in the organization to manage risk, are risk. That's why we say that risk is a necessary continuum. I will make sure any risk manager must understand this, and I will continue to repeat it so that you will get the simplicity of my message. Risk is everywhere. Everything is risk, and risk is a necessary continuum. It does no end. As long as you are in business, you have to manage risk, and it is not the role and responsibility of only one person. So this will make us to understand that as a chartered secretary, whether you are an administrator in the organization, or you are a manager, or you are responsible for corporate governance, or as company secretary, you are going to manage one risk or the other. You manage people. You are going to manage people. You are going to manage customers. You're going to manage everything constitutes risk. And that is why the chartered secretary is critical, and it is important that you are also a risk manager. And look at the definition that we have given, is that a chartered secretary is a multi-skilled professional. You are a multi-skilled in key areas of organizational management, which includes corporate governance and corporate administration. So now, this is the central stage of our presentation. This is all we now need to know. This is the tool we are going to use to be an effective risk manager. Everything on this slide is the tool you need to be an effective risk manager. It is no skyrocket theory. The first is to have what we call integrated risk policy and strategy. And any integrated risk policy and strategy must have what we have listed in this arrow point here. The first is risk identification and assessment. You must first of all collate all the risk in the organization. Don't say one is no, this one is no. Don't prioritize at this stage. Don't prioritize every risk. And since we have said that everything is risk, it means that when we are generating the risk profile of the organization, every component of the organization must be imputed. So that's risk identification. You now assess them. The assessment is when you now start to prioritize, because there are certain risks that the possibility that they're going to occur is higher than another. And that even if they occur, the disaster that they're going to generate, or the tragedy that they're going to bring about, or the challenges they're going to bring about, are higher than another. So that is why risk prioritization and classification is important. When you have assessed all your risk, you collate every risk in the organization. That's what we call risk profile. Then you now do risk classification by assessing and prioritizing them. You must prioritize your risk. And that is what, because risk is a continuum. We have told you, it's just like in economics, the fundamental principle of economics, we tell you human wants are instantiable. It means today you said you want to be a millionaire. All my problem will be solved. The moment you be a millionaire, some other problems will uphold themselves to you and say, look at me, I'm here, Mr. Millionaire. The bigger the headache, the bigger the head, the bigger the headache. Even Chief M.K. Abiola, who was of blessed memory, when he was interviewed, he said, yes, I'm a billionaire, but the bigger the head, the bigger the headache. So the higher, and when you see any organization, the higher the risk that the organization wants to, the higher the profits the organization wants to generate, it means the higher will be your risk, because there is no free lunch. That's just the truth. If you want to generate anything, you must know that risk is attached to it. No matter how small, even small profit will bring small risk, will attach small risk. So you must classify and prioritize your risk. And that is what we regard as risk identification and risk assessment. When you have done that, we have told you, we said risk is a necessary continuum. What this means is that some risk can be avoided, some few risks can be avoided. So those ones, you avoid them. Those ones, so those ones can be avoided. Now, there are quite a number that cannot be avoided. A lot of risks cannot be avoided. Only few can be avoided. So you will look at those ones that you can avoid and mark them. These ones, we can avoid them. Now, there are quite a number that cannot be avoided, and their effect or consequence can be disastrous. So you accept, you must accept. And that's why Yoruba say, you must accept fate and more fatigue. Accept that risk is part of life. Risk is part of even your own individual life. You must collate all the risk in your life as an individual and then prioritize them, classify them. You must manage your own risk, not only that of organization. So when you accept some, you avoid some, you accept some also you feel that if I accept them, the consequences, I cannot take them. The consequences will be disaster. So what do you do with those ones? You exploit means of how you can diversify those risks. You share it. You don't bear the risk alone. Just like when you want to invest your money, you put all your money in one Yoruba. They say don't put everything, all your egg in one basket. It's an old means of managing risk, because Yoruba is aware of the fact that risk is everywhere, and that in order to manage risk effectively, you must understand the concept of diversification. So risk diversification will be the next. And then you share your risk. You share it. You look for a partner. When you want to enter a business, you don't only think about the profit. You also know that the larger the profit, the higher the risk. And then you ask yourself, if I bear the profit alone, yes, I will hit alone. But what about if the risk happens? Can I bear the risk alone? Well, if you're ready to die alone, you can do that. But you can also take a decision and say, I want to share my risk. Then you look for partners to join you, so that when the risk happens, you're not the only one to bear the effect. You share the risk. And there are different ways to do that. Now, transfer of risk is another way of mitigation, risk mitigation. And that is insurance. Sometimes you look at, I can't share my risk with a partner. I can't get a partner who wants to come in. The moment everybody is doing due diligence, that's one of the ways when people want to enter a business or a partnership. You do due diligence on your partner on the business. When you see that the business projections are not favorable, that the risks are high, and that you don't have the risk appetite to bear those risks, the next thing you do is to insure it. You transfer it to someone who will bear it, who have the risk appetite, the ability to absorb a lot of risk because they have a pool of resources, and that is the insurance company. Now, when you have done all those things as a human being, don't forget spirituality. Spiritualization is also important. And that is the last, very important. Yes, you've avoided risk. you've accepted some, you've exploited means, you've diversified your risk, you've shared it, you've transferred it, you've insured some of your risk. Spiritualization is key. And what do I mean by that? Is that there are spiritual principles every organization, every individual must also obey, which help to, one way or the other, whether believe it or not, you may not be able to empirically prove this, but organizations are becoming to understand that even corporate organizations have spiritual role to play. Have spiritual role to play, have spiritual role to play. And that's why some engages in corporate social responsibility, charity. You give back to the society. It's a way of spiritually, just like a Christian will pay their tithe, a Muslim will pay their zakat. It's a way of invoking spiritual principles to protect you and your business from things that are beyond control, which we call force majeure. So, and that's why those deep, profound billionaires and entrepreneurs, you see that when they make a lot of money, they also make sure that they spiritualize the business by engaging in corporate social responsibilities, giving back to the society by way of charity. It's a way of also risk management. Risk monitoring and reporting. So when you have done all these things, because we said risk is a necessary continuum, it has to be continually tracked. You have to continuously reevaluate and reporting and, doing your risk reporting, because it's a necessary continuum. If you are able to manage one risk effectively, that act of managing it effectively will also constitute another risk. So there is no sleep for a risk manager. And we have said that everyone in the organization is a risk manager. So when a big risk crystallizes, when you look at the last part of that slide, when a big risk crystallizes, what are those things you need to put in place? Contingency plans. You must have heard about business continuity plans, disaster recovery plans. This is very important because there will always be big risk. It must happen. It may happen once in a while, but it will always happen. Look at COVID-19. Whoever thought it? It's a big risk that affects everybody. Stand down the business. A lot of businesses have closed down as a result. Businesses have closed down as a result of COVID-19. You may not know. A lot of people have lost their jobs. And then during COVID-19, for any business to continue to operate, you must have a contingency plan or business continuity plans. So you must adjust and execute your BCP. And those are the first steps. When you have done that, even in spite of that, you call in indemnity. There are always people who indemnify you for your risk, like your insurance company. Approach them if you have suffered any risk. Like some banks during the riots, a lot of banks were thrown on fire. Some, their ATMs were destroyed. Some ATM houses were destroyed. So they go back to their insurance to recover their losses. So you call in your indemnity. If that cannot solve your problem, you seek help with dignity. And that's why you see a lot of palliatives are around the corner. International funds are available. Intervention funds are there. Don't be ashamed to seek help if you're in trouble. People feel, oh, I'm a big man. I can't call. Call your friends, call your partners to help you out. Because this is a big risk that has crystallized. And then reinforce with spirituality. And as a matter of last resort, when you have done all these things and it doesn't go, wind up the organization. That's why some people will liquidate. Say, we can't take it alone. Ask the court to liquidate the company or to wind up. Just like a human being, an individual. When all hope is lost, what does he do? He resort to committing of suicide. Say, well, I'll go and kill myself. So corporate suicide is an act of corporate winding up or liquidation, self-liquidation. It's also an act of corporate suicide. When the organization says, I have to kill myself, I can no longer, I'm in debt, I'm in risk, the company is in disaster, there's nothing we can do. So you shut down the organization. So that's the risk management process. I've also given you examples of some of the tools you need to use because it's not good to speak only theoretical. How you must have a risk register. In your department, if you're a manager, you must have a risk manager, a risk register, where you collate all your risk. Then who are the owners? Where is the focal point of the risk? What's the possibility of this risk happening? What is the probability? You are going to apportion a probability ratio to it. Control, contingency plan. What are the mitigating actions if they happen? What are we going to do? What are the responses we're going to do? What is the impact of this risk? This is the risk register, and that is the contents. So when you look at the risk register, you see that there's a place when you look at the impact, you have to be able to measure And that's impact is about high impact, low incidence. Incidence is about the frequency. How possible, how probable can this thing happen? Then the impact is if it happens, what will happen? Is it a kind of risk that can shut down the business? Is it the kind of risk that can hit down your bottom line or your profits and then put you in trouble? Or is it a kind of risk that will only affect one section and we still go, life still goes on? So you must be able to apportion an element of impact and incident to your risk. And then risk assessment evaluation is recommended to be carried out on a quarterly basis. And I've given examples of some of the likelihood to happen. Low is always in green, impact is low. Of course, when the likelihood is low, the impact is low, and the response is acceptable. You have responded to it, even though the likelihood and the possibility is low. Then it means that the status will be improving, so it will all be green. Now, when a likelihood of something happening is high, the impact is going to be high, and your response is poor. The result will be that it will be poor, so everything goes in red. So when you open the register, highlighting some of these things with the ink pens will let us know how intense is the risk profile of the organization and your responses to managing the impact or the probability of them happening. So let's look at the takeaway story of the Titanic failure. We've heard about the Titanic ship that sank in 1912. This was a ship that was built, and it was called Titanic, that even God cannot sink this ship. Those who built it said even God cannot sink it. But what happened? This thing sank, and a lot of people died. Thousands of lives were lost. Why? Lack of risk management, because there weren't enough lifeboats for everyone. Yes, if this force majeure had happened, if they have had a proper risk management framework in place, they were confident that we have built a ship, but they lost the perception or the conception that risk is something that you cannot totally avoid. No matter how much something is concretely built or certain, you cannot avoid it. So it means that no matter how much you build whatever, no matter how much something looks certain, there is an element of certainty. People will say, yes, there is nothing that will happen. There is nothing that cannot happen. And that is the basis of risk. And that's why we say that what happened to Titanic, you must have heard of, you must have watched that film. A ship that was solidly built by the best expert in the world. They boasted that God cannot sink it, but it sank because God wants to show you that we are created. Risk is a continuum. Risk is not something you can boast that can never happen. And because you boasted, it happened. And why? If you knew that it could happen, if you were humble, you will have said, okay, what about if this thing happened? What are we going to do? Okay, it means we can have enough lifeboat for people in case it happens. If they had thought about that, but they were deluded by what we call arrogance or heart of hubris. And that's why every risk manager must not have. Because risk management is about humility. Risk management comes into place by accepting the fact that there is nothing we can do to risk. Risk will continue to pursue us. The same thing happened with Volkswagen in the 90s. The best you have about Volkswagen, one of the best companies with over $5 billion in annual sales. But lack of risk management, cost, and they have to file for bankruptcy a few months in the late 90s because they did not involve when they built an ERP project, one of the solid ERP platform the world had ever had. The only mistake they made was non-involvement of end users. That led to the disaster. So the conclusion here is that the later finding of MIT's Loans Management Review and Deloitte, which they conducted in 2015, was that strategic thinking and proactive risk management is the key driver of business performance and corporate success. You can say that, yes, the organization have customers, want to manage our customer, you heard about customer service, You heard about profit, business, relationship management, business development. Everything borders down on strategic thinking, your ability to manage your risk. It's what is going to let us know whether you're going to be a successful company or not. So this is the bigger picture. And of course, this is the final aspect of my presentation, is that let us listen to Professor Michael Porter of Harvard Business School. Risk strategy is incomplete without the right culture and technology. It is also useless if it does not help business performance and translate into stakeholders' happiness and corporate sustainability. This goal is not risk minimization. The goal is not risk avoidance. That's what Professor Apata. The goal of risk management is not that we want to minimize risk or avoid risk. It's to optimize risk, even take advantage of risk, to turn risk into opportunities. And that's the essence of SWOT analysis. When you look at yourself as a human being, you are not perfect. You are a combination of possibilities and risk. You are a combination of negativities and positivities. So your ability to synergize these two, polarities is what will make you a successful or an ongoing human being. So in order to achieve corporate sustainability, which is, of course, is the greatest objective of any organization, it's not about just making profit. It's just for us to be able to make profit and sustain it for a long time into the future. That is the essence. Sometimes the shortcut approach to making profit, you make profit today, you say you're a successful company today, after 1 or 2 years, the company died. A lot of corporate failures occurred. It's because the concept of corporate sustainability is not put in perspective. And that's why we have brought out all the 7 modems: policy, strategy, risk leadership and culture, technology, value for money, business growth, stakeholders' happiness. Those are the milestones that will bring about corporate sustainability. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I will, you can see that I'm rushing. It's because I had to leave a board meeting, a management meeting, and which I need to go back now because they're already calling me, it's time. And I need to rush to do this presentation. Otherwise, it will have been more enjoyable than what I have done. But you can always go back to some of the sources I've provided for you. Integrated Risk Management by Emilia Facile and Hayon. When you want to know anything about enterprise risk management, it is wonderful. Read Emilia Facile and Hayon Portonu 2012. Then, in terms of risk management frameworks and tools, which were brought out by COSO, that's the committee of the sponsoring organization of the Tradeway Commission. They brought out a lot of tools that you can use and templates for managing risk. You can go to their website and subscribe, and that will not be bad. Risk management as a source of competitive advantage. That we do not see risk again as an enemy, as a devil. You continue to every business, you see risk as a friend, as something you need to manage. You can transform or you can transmute. That is Michael Porter. So risk management as a source of competitive advantage by Professor Michael Porter of Harvard University. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me take my leave.